What is up, my fellow people on YouTube? This is the one and only The Perpetuating Party of Patriots, here today with a comparison video. Now, the first comparison video that I did was comparing the DVD and VHS versions of the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour series. I'll link to that video in the description, but it was originally just gonna be like me comparing DVD and VHS tapes to one another, or like multiple versions of like DVDs or that type of stuff. But then recently I got the idea of, you know what, how about we expand this in the games as well? And I think that would be, in all honesty, much more interesting to do than just like DVD and VHS comparisons. So today, you probably saw by the title and by the thumbnail, but today we are going to be comparing the two versions of Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Those being Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, usually in these comparison videos, you'd probably like expect me to do like a huge rundown of or history of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 or the game in general, but instead we're going to do something a little bit different for this one. I'm just going to be talking about my personal experiences with the game itself, so let's delve right into that. So, my experiences with Marvel vs. Capcom 3 go as far back as to the year that the game was released, back in 2011. Jesus, it's been a fucking long time since then, but anyways, when I found out about this game, or when this game was released, I was quite literally a kindergartner. And how exactly I found out about it? Well, my dad actually had a subscription to a gaming magazine by the name of Game Informer. What exact issue it was, I don't exactly remember, but I remember just turning around in the pages through the book one day. That's kind of what I usually do. I don't even know if I actually read the stuff in there, but I noticed this little advertisement in the book that advertised a little game by the name of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which is the name we're talking about. And I'm not gonna lie, when I saw that in the book, in that particular issue, I kind of shit my pants a little. Well, I mean, it was a crossover between two things that I really liked as a kid: Marvel superheroes and, well, Capcom. Well, mainly Street Fighter, but Capcom nonetheless. And yeah, let's just say this game was a pretty huge deal back in the day. Like, there was even a kid in my kindergarten class that actually had that exact page of that book, like, crumpled up in his pants so he could look at it. Where exactly at? I don't want to quite go into that, but yeah, even other kids in, well, my kindergarten class were pretty interested in this game. And how exactly I first got my hands on it? Well, my dad actually got the special edition of the game that was released. It was the one that came in, I mean, it was in like a steelbook. It also came with this little comic, which I thought was a pretty interesting read. But yeah, what I was first in my when it came to my first impressions of the game as a little like 6 or 7 year old playing it, yeah, I was kind of blown away. Well, I don't know if I'd quite say blown away, but it was a neat little game, because I think up until that point my main experiences with fighting games were mainly in, well, Street Fighter, Super Smash Brothers, and Mortal Kombat. But yeah, I did really like the idea of Marvel vs. Capcom. It was a If you have no idea how the Marvel vs. Capcom games play, they basically play. Okay, this is kind of a weird comparison, but basically imagine Teen of Fighters, but if you could actually like change around the three teammates. Well, I mean, it doesn't exactly play like Teen of Fighters. Like Marvel vs. Capcom and KOF are completely separate games in terms of their gameplay, but yeah, besides the point, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I remember being a very fun game for the time. And then later in that year, in 2011, or maybe I got in 2012, I don't exactly know, they then made a update to the game like Capcom is usually known to do, and that version is known as Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And yeah, later down the line, I ended up getting that, and I mean, obviously, I enjoyed it more because, I mean, hey, we got 12 more characters, which I thought was Well, I mean, usually I'm just a sucker if you add more characters to a fighting game, and yeah, the rest of that was pretty much history, but yeah, recently I decided to get these two games again for, well, collection purposes and also to relive some of my childhood memories. Just this is the Marvel Capcom 3 is by far one of my biggest childhood memories, mainly because of the novelty of actually checking it out in the same year that it was released. But yeah, nowadays when I decide to like play the two versions back to back, I noticed there's actually surprisingly quite a bit of differences between them. Well, not really gameplay wise, but yeah, I decided how about we take a look at the kind of minor or kind of major differences between the two versions. And yeah, I think I've rambled on long enough with my history of the games, and I don't want that to be the whole video. Let's take a look at the differences between these two games. So first, let's kind of start off with some minor differences between the two versions. Firstly, as you can tell by this side-by-side comparison, there are two different main menus, or there are two different startup menus between Fate of Two Worlds and Ultimate. So, Fate of Two Worlds, that's the subtitle of regular MVC3, by the way. It's kind of boring. Well, it's actually pretty boring. It's mainly just the name of the game, like the logo for the game, the subtitle, the press any button to start little thing, and in the background it's just like a kind of like holographic globe, I think. Or I don't know exactly what that is, but Ultimate Marvel Capcom 3, it does have a different menu. It's not like the most interesting thing either, but I mean, there's a bit more going on. I mean, you actually have characters on the startup menu, which I think is, I mean, it's something at least. Like, yeah, Wolverine, Ryu, Virgil, Ghost Rider, like those whatever characters are on the menu. But yeah, like I said, this is really some minor stuff where it kind of gets into some a bit more major differences. Well, when it comes to the actual main menus, which I kind of actually said, but didn't actually mean. There are some differences between the main menus of these versions. Like, firstly, when it comes to Fate of Two Worlds' menus, it actually has a different, like, menu for each, like, little semi-mode, I guess you'd say. Like, for example, the main menu itself, where you actually select the different modes or whatever, there's usually a different, like, screen for each one. Like, for example, the main general one, where that shows when you start up the game, it has Wolverine and Ryu fighting. And when you go into offline mode, it changes to a different menu, showing Dante and Deadpool fighting. Although Ultimate, it's a bit less interesting. Like, I do like the pictures that they do show for each separate menu, and those actually happen when you just scroll by each one, but when you actually click on them, the pictures just stay the same, or like the menu itself stays the same, which, I mean, yeah, I kind of prefer how they did it in Fate of Two Worlds, but yeah, again, the menu stuff is pretty basic. Now on to some more major differences between the two versions. Alright, this is where the bigger differences between the two versions come in. So, there's actually different music between the two versions. Well, not really in terms of character themes. Well, I mean, the new additional characters in Ultimate have new themes, obviously, but what I mean by different music is on the menus and the character select. First, we are going to play some snippets of the main menus of the original Fate of Two Worlds version and the Ultimate version. I'm not going to play them in their entirety for obvious reasons, but here is the theme for Marvel's Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds' main menu. And here is the main menu theme to Ultimate. And now, time to show some of the more interesting differences in music. That being the character select themes. Yeah, there are actually. Now, here's the cool thing with Fate of Two Worlds. There is not just one main. There is not just one character select theme. They actually have two different versions, and, well, I'm gonna play them now. Here is the main version of the character select theme for Fate of Two Worlds. And one thing that I found very cool about the second version of the theme is it is actually an orchestral remix of the Fate of Two Worlds main menu theme, or it's an orchestral version of the character select theme. And yeah, I find that very cool. Well, mainly because it's an orchestral version. I mean, if you make an orchestral version of anything, I'm probably gonna just fall in love with it instantly. But yeah, here is the orchestral version of the theme. And now here is the character select theme. Yes, there is only one for Ultimate Marvel's Capcom 3. Yeah, it is kind of interesting how they actually changed the versions of the character select theme. Which one I prefer, I actually kind of mixed on that. I actually really like both character select themes, and yeah, now we're gonna step away from music for a little bit. This isn't the end of it. Now time to go on to the character select screen itself. So when it comes to the character select screens, yeah, like usual, there are some pretty distinct differences between them. Firstly, here is the version from Fate of Two Worlds. This one I actually do like quite a bit. Well, mainly for some kind of minor stuff. Firstly, when it comes to the characters, the portraits or character icons themselves, I do like how when it comes to the Capcom characters, they're kind of facing right, and the Marvel characters are facing left, and they're kind of like right up by each other, like looking straight at each other. I think that's kind of cool. It kind of like draws a bit of a parallel. And okay, I think the biggest interesting thing about the character select theme or the character select screens for Fate of Two Worlds is the actual place that the actual thing that shows what your characters are, like how your team is. Yeah, I mean, it may not look that interesting, like, you just have, like, 3 characters being shown, but one thing that is pretty cool is for player 1 and for player 2, or CPU, depending on if you have someone playing with you or not, they actually, like, the characters actually show up on a little comic book, which I think it's a kind of cool little thing that they did. I mean, again, it's not that great, but again, it's just cool that they did kind of have that little detail, since, I mean, well, Marvel is a comic book publishing company, but yeah, then we have the character select screen for Ultimate Marvel's Capcom 3, and yeah, there are some cool things about this menu, like, for example, mainly the background, where it shows, like, multiple different stuff in the back. Like, this is kind of like a history thing. Well, I mean, not like going into the history of the Marvel's Capcom series, but in the background, you actually do have the covers for MVC 1, 2, and 3 in the back. I mean, you can't really see it because it's being covered up by the characters, but yeah, again, that is kind of cool. But when it comes to the actual character icons themselves, yeah, I don't think it's as well. I mean, there are sorry about that. There are some things that are kind of cool about this, like the Capcom side of things. It's on like a blue comic book page, and Marvel is on the red side of the comic book page. Well, right and left, but yeah, when it comes to when you select the characters themselves, yeah, it's not as imaginative. They're not on a comic book this time. They're just separate icons for each character, and yeah, again, it's not that big of a deal. It's just, I don't know. It's just little things that I feel like Fate of Two Worlds did a bit better, but yeah, now that we are done with kind of rambling on about the character select, let's go on to the actual, well, not really gameplay, because it kind of remains the same between the two versions. We're instead going to look at the little differences on when you're actually playing the game. Alright, so when it comes to the actual fighting screens, there are some minor differences between these two. First, we're going to look at what's different on the Fate 2 World side of things. So, when it comes to the character icons, or like the health bars and the timer and stuff like that, yeah, there are definitely some differences. Well, the picture I'm showing right now is actually the E3 screenshot. It's going to look a little different from if you actually get the game and purchase it yourself, but yeah, as you tell by the health bars, or how like each health bar is, it shows your character on the very end of the screen, then it shows the life bar itself, and right by your character icons, there are these little dots. If you're asking what those little dots stand for, well, it's not exactly full at the moment, but those represent each character's X factor. Well, I think they kind of all activate at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, as you continue to fight on, as you will see, as you go by, the X Factor gauge actually builds up. So, yeah, while it may look like a standard dot for now, it will continually and gradually become more red, and it will show an X form. And when it comes to the timer itself, yeah, it does show the number of what time it's at right now, or maybe it'd be like the infinite symbol if you have the time set to infinite, and there is a little bit of a globe behind the behind the time limit itself, and again, it's not really that interesting, but I mean, hey, it's something, and it also has, well, Marvel's Capcom subtitle below it. And now, when it comes to the character select in Ultimate, yeah, again, when it comes to stuff outside of gameplay, I think Ultimate did take away some interesting stuff. Like, for example, when it comes to the character's life bars, yeah, this one I don't know if I can exactly say they made it worse. I mean, all it really shows at the moment is just like which character is currently fighting at the moment. Like, they'll be front and center, unlike in Fate 2 Worlds where it will just show like all three at once. But when it comes to the assist characters or the other characters on the team, they are right behind the main character fighting. And when it comes to the position of the X Factor, instead of being like right by the character, they're actually right at the end. And each character doesn't have a separate symbol this time. There's just one to represent all three, which, I mean, I think it's more convenient. Like, it's more convenient. It lets you know, hey, the X Factor applies to all three, not just one for each character. But when it comes to the time limit itself, yeah, they kind of just made it really, really bleaker. Like, it's literally just like what it's at time it's on, and just the word time itself. Not doesn't have any fancy stuff like Marvel's Capcom subtitle or the globe behind it. But again, that's really minor stuff. It doesn't take away from it hugely. But yeah, and I mean, it was covered up in the MVC3 Fate 2 Worlds scene thing, but the ultimate gauge, or the hyper combo gauge, does look a little bit different. But again, like, all they really did in ultimate was just like add a border around the number and the gauge itself. But yeah, or like the border looks a bit different, but again, not a huge thing. Now, time to go back to mute. Well, time to like transition into like the victory themes for whoever wins the match. Well, okay, before we talk about like the different music for each victory theme, there is also a difference between, well, the victory screens themselves. So, as usual, Fate 2 Worlds has the more interesting victory screen. So let's take a look at it. So once you're at once whoever wins, well, obviously wins. As you can see, it shows the portrait of the character that you're currently playing as who won, and your two allies who also have a separate picture for them. And it also shows the actual arena that you fought at, which I think is pretty cool. And as you'd see, it is in a comic book style. When it comes to Ultimate's victory screen, yeah, it's much less interesting like usual. It just shows the winner screen, and again, it does show like each character side by side, but again, I just like how the presentation looks on MVC3 or Braided Two Worlds' version. But yeah, now time to the actual music differences. Alright, now time to transition back into the music side of things. Here we have the two different victory themes. Again, like usual, each game has a different victory theme. First, let's take a look at the Faded Two Worlds' victory theme. Obviously, again, we're just gonna play snippets, we're not gonna play the whole thing, but yeah, here is Faded Two Worlds' victory theme. And here we have Ultimate's victory theme. Yeah, surprisingly, the styles of the two victory themes are actually pretty different. Like, Faded Two Worlds has a more kind of like electronic rock type deal with it, or the type sound with it, and Ultimate has a more techno sound with it. Which one I prefer? Personally, I think Faded Two Worlds' victory theme kind of hits a bit harder, but Ultimate isn't bad either. And, yeah, it's pretty much all the differences that I could really talk about for now. I mean, there are obviously other differences, like, for example, when it comes to Faded Two Worlds, it has a different, I think there's actually 4 different intros, which is pretty insane, and Ultimate also has a different intro. Ultimate obviously adds more content to the game, and I just think it's a better version if you're looking for gameplay. Like, it has more characters, more stages. You actually have a new mode called Heroes and Heralds, which I think is pretty interesting, but yeah, Faded Two Worlds, I think there was a bit more effort into the other aspects, like mainly other side stuff, but again, I think Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is my personal favorite game in the franchise. Now, I do love the other games in the franchise, like, I love Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, especially 2, but I think 3 has kind of just stuck with me for the longest, because, I mean, it was really the first one that I played. Now, I'm not saying you have to agree with me on this, because I obviously know there are people that prefer Marvel vs. Capcom 2 over this one, but yeah, for me, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is my personal favorite game in the MVC franchise, which isn't saying a whole lot, because, I mean, this franchise is really good for the most part. I don't know about Infinite, I haven't really played it that much, and I don't really know if I really want to. I may down the line, but yeah, although there is one huge thing that these two versions have in common, and that is they have both been nuked off of 6th-gen consoles in terms of if you're able to download them. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just MVC3, like, they kind of just nuked all the Marvel vs. Capcom games off of being able to download them from the Xbox Live Arcade on the 360 and the PS3 store, which sucks because those are the most recent versions of the games, and you can't get any of the other ones. Oh yeah, and before we leave, I figured I might as well just say this, hashtag free MVC2. Anyways, see you guys in the next video.